Hello, GitHub universe. And welcome to looking at VS Code and GitHub using tricks for data scientists. I'm Harold Kirshner. I work on VS Code. I do look at a lot of data. I run surveys. We do A/B testing. We work on a website. So there's a ton of data around me, but I'm not a data scientist. I'm not sure why I'm up on stage here to talk about this. But let's learn data science together. And I think you saw the keynote already, what's probably coming. So we're going to start, of course, with Codespaces. I think everybody these days has a job of looking at data scientists. So even if it's not your title, even if you work in the team and you have a data scientist, being able to bring the data to a discussion empowers everybody in the team. That's why I'm so excited about things like Codespaces templates, where I can just open a Jupyter notebook. So it's zero to set up. And I started getting into data science. I had to learn notebooks. I started putting all these things on my machine. And Codespaces shortcuts all of that. I don't have to manage my environment, have to keep it maintained, install new dependencies as they come out, keep it secure, all these other things. And I like VS Code. I know my way around VS Code. And I want to keep using that to learn notebooks. Even though it's Jupyter notebooks, notebooks now as a concept morphed into so many more apps, including VS Code. So let's start looking at that. If you want to try this out at home, just use this template on Jupyter Notebook. I already have it warmed up, so we can dive right in. So the great part about VS Code in browser, it will bring you all the VS Code capabilities with just everything you need, including notebook support. So we're already looking at notebooks in VS Code, but this is my VS Code. So you probably notice one important difference, sidebar on the right where it belongs, which is important because if you actually close and open it, it will work much better with everything else and wouldn't move your code as much around. It's also my theme. This theme is actually Dracula, so feel free to steal it. It has my extensions that I curated and groomed over the years, so I can actually understand proper markdown with emojis, which is also an important fact. And it has my keyboard shortcuts. I'm not sure about you. I've been using a few editors over the years. I started with Sublime and Atom and VS Code. And you kind of accumulate shortcuts in your muscle memory that are hard to get rid of. So my stick is Command-Shift-D for duplicating lines. If I just go in here, I can duplicate my line away. And it has been always like my left hand is just, I can't get rid of it. I keep hitting it, and nothing happens. Actually, the debugger opens, I think. So I had to shift that around. Now the debugger doesn't open anymore, and I can properly duplicate lines. And all that comes with me through Settings Sync. So I'm logged into GitHub, into VS Code with GitHub. And as soon as you switch on Settings Sync on your desktop machine, it will bring everything you have in VS Code into the cloud. As soon as you open the code space, it will calm down and will just look like your VS Code, which is great. Also, of course, this is a VS Code in a code space, so it comes with a terminal. And that's a big difference to other notebook environments that you open that gives you a nice notebook environment. It might be preloaded with a lot of things, like this one, pips3 list. Let's see what's here for Python. And we get a lot of these packages already. So where did they come from? They come from a dev container, which you might have seen in keynotes as well. So this is your config as code way to define your development environment and all the dependencies. So Settings Sync brings everything that you already pre-configured for your VS Code, and then dev container defines what environment you're working in. In this case, this is the pre-built GitHub package, which comes with a lot of Python and packages already. And then in this case, we just do a pip install to get all the rest that we need. We also get these two extensions. So if you start working on notebooks locally, get the Jupyter and the Python extension. They will naturally be recommended to you once you start, which then brings you this beautiful notebook support. So notebooks are a first-class citizen in VS Code and have been for a while. If you look on the marketplace for extensions, you will find several other notebook formats. For example, the VS Code team heavily uses GitHub issue notebooks to manage all their backlogs at work. So there's many ways we found notebooks help people to understand not just data, but learn new languages and a lot of other things. In this case, we're looking at data science. So this is the Jupyter notebook version we're looking at. And if you know notebooks, you will feel comfortable and at ease. You have your markdown cells with VS Code markdown editing, which is, of course, amazing. We have code cells with a run button on the left. This is kind of the most natural thing to do in a notebook, editing code and keeping running it. On hover and focus, we see these other things pop up to execute code on top and below, splitting cells, and of course, a lot more options there. So this is a familiar notebook UI from everything we know. Then, of course, comes the outline, which is important for especially longer ones. Let's look at one of the other notebooks that's in here, which is the image classifier. So now we see the outline really shining. Make it bigger. The outline shines. It highlights every single header in the file. So even if you have a longer notebook, if your analysis grows and grows, if you write a book in Jupyter Notebooks, which people do, you can still navigate that. And on top of that, let me enable screencast mode if you haven't seen it before. So Command-Shift-O is go to symbol. So if you already have these memory shortcuts from navigating your own code, they all just, again, work in notebooks. If you haven't adopted them, I keep looking for them. Look it up in the command palette and definitely add it to your muscle memory. So looking at the notebook now, we have the hover buttons that I showed before, but there's also a lot more customizations. So VS Code is well known for its massive amounts of UI settings. So you can hide and show UI really based on your actual knowledge of how to reach those. So if you can go into Zen mode and have no UI. That's probably the one extreme. So the notebook layout is a really quick way to abstract what you're seeing within the notebook. For example, in this case, I already changed this setting to show the toolbar on hover versus just on click. So now when I open this, I will see this only now, and this will show on hover still. This is toolbar. So that's one way you can customize it and really make it feel. If you already know notebooks, you can get to all the checkboxes that make it look and feel like the notebooks you already know. So as we now run this, and I ran, I think, Passabit through in the past, so I click Run All, and I see in the outline already which cells are executing. So I can follow along, which is important. You want to know what's actually being printed. So I can go in and see the output, but I can also see how long things took, which is important because you don't want to rerun cells that take a minute to run, and then, oops, I did it again. So this is something to keep an eye on. Let's take a simple notebook to actually look at some of the actual editing. So this is great from a notebook perspective. Everything is here. But then from a VS Code perspective, you will bring in all the amazing language capabilities that VS Code already has. So if we go into Markdown, we can actually go and edit, in this case, let's try to understand Markdown. So Markdown is important for notebooks to actually describe what you're doing. In this case, I added read this link to the README. So as we're adding more code, finding insights, we want to actually document them back in Markdown. So Markdown is a first-class language in VS Code. So it understands even the autocomplete within some of these files. So I can go in here, hit autocomplete. It will understand I'm looking for the README. So linking between files becomes really easy as you tell your story. It doesn't just understand the file. It understands the content as well. So I can also autocomplete this header within the file. And then because we have code navigation, I can also click it and open it later on. So it makes Codebooks much more interactive as you write the Markdown. Now looking at code, this was Markdown, the content writing. So it's easy to split cells and execute new ones. And if you start actually going in and writing code, you again get the amazing auto-completion from VS Code because it has a Python interpreter and language server built in, Copilot. So all these pandas, documentations, and API calls become really transparent to you in how you use them and autocomplete stuff. Once you have code in front of you, you want to make sure to hover things to understand them. And there's these inlay hints that give you an idea of what types of variables you're looking at. So that's where VS Code really shines in not just writing code, but also when you start looking at a notebook to actually understand how the code works. So now we got the basics of notebooks. We're all actual data science experts. You can add that to your LinkedIn skills now. Let's see what else we can come up with. So we know data science. Now let's collaborate some more within the actual notebooks. So to get to templates, go to /Codespaces, which you have probably seen a few times today already. And we're going to move on into how we collaborate together. So it's important in data science, especially as a team, to have review, to properly have your analysis version controlled, have the data you're looking at version controlled. So GitHub is a great place to do that. Your developers are on there, so they can start actually understanding where the metrics come from, how to act on them. They can create their own metrics and bring them in. So I just bootstrapped this simple data science collaboration repository. I tried to document what are the best practices, how we're going to work together here, how to collaborate. And then I started opening this first pull request. So pull request, as you do an analysis, putting it already in a pull request to share early, to think about what you're doing, it helps me especially to get feedback. Sometimes I'm not fully sure on data science, like is this the right approach? Is this actually, am I p-hacking myself here and trying to find insights? So it's a great way to get to work together on data science and empower everybody to contribute, and everybody can jump in and learn. In this case, I did pull in the Stack Overflow survey from 2021 and thought about, like, for VS Code, there should be some amazing insights here. And I didn't get too far. I have a draft open and already changed a few files. So if you've seen notebooks on GitHub before, that's how they look like. So what's in private preview right now is actually the proper notebook diffing that's much richer. So that's a feature preview in private beta that you can check out. And it's going to make notebooks on GitHub so much more powerful. But we're also going to get the same experience in VS Code. So if we go back here and now open this. So usually, if you just want to check out an analysis, you would get it on your local machine. You try to pip it in the right environment. It's a lot of work. I don't want to have this on my own machine. But I do like VS Code on desktop. And the way I can do that, I already have this code space here. You go and open it in Visual Studio Code on your desktop. And of course, I already did that just to be less Wi-Fi dependent. And this demo is, by the way, running over my phone. So this is still good. It's a very safe way, even on a low connectivity, to work in these notebooks. So this is now VS Code on my desktop. And it gives me the same experience, like, because I have settings sync, it looks like the other VS Code. So usually, let's look at this notebook, what I created. I have a Stack Overflow survey that's in the CSV over here. Then I had some questions already. The CSV, by the way, published under the Open Database license, and it's already filtered down to self-described data scientists. Then I import pandas and Seaborn, which I love, which have great APIs. I don't necessarily know the APIs, but I know they have great APIs. I apply some options that are useful to make it look nice. I load the CSV, and then I look at the data. So this is already hard to tell, because this is for something 49 questions in this survey, so not too insightful to look at. And then I'm trying to get this first insight from it. So what if I compare coding experience with compensation? That must be a first shot at least saying, like, oh, if you spend a lot of time in data science and you know data science, you probably earn more money. But this is not the insight I'm looking for. So this is what happens if you don't clean up data, if you just try to guess from the fields what should be happening. So let's fix it up. The great part here is what I'm going to demo. I'm going to run this for now, see if it still executes the same thing. Up here, running, and the plot. Yep, still looks broken. So let's go in. We have, of course, the df head, which tries to describe the data. And now I want to show off Data Wrangler. So Data Wrangler is not available yet. It's going to be available end of the month. This is the sneak preview of this tool and the first public demo, I guess. So really happy, and thank you to the team for letting me show that. It's great. It's going to be amazing. So this is the tool to have data exploration and cleanup within your notebook. According to the Anaconda survey, over 45% of data science is just prepping data. It's about loading and cleaning it up and trying to make sense of it. And it's just a lot of time that goes into looking at histograms, looking at columns, removing columns, cleaning things up. And this is the tool that brings it into VS Code. So less context switching, less opening things in Excel, cleaning them up, exporting them. You don't know what people did in Excel. You can't repeat it. So this is really about where this tool finds a sweet spot. So Data Wrangler brings this whole new UI into VS Code. On the right side, we have operations we can do on each column. The summary is what we're going to look at now. So we have 4,084 rows, so that's the respondents, and with 49 columns. So that's how many questions they probably answered. We see some answers that weren't provided as often because it's a survey, it has branches. If you pick a US, then you can pick a state. So that's a good sense, like what are actually the values we could want to use that makes sense. So if you look at then this main row, this is where all the columns will be broken out to and already give you some summary. So we get histograms if it's a number, and we get these percentages if it's only a string value. So we see only 3% of students, so you probably don't want to get too many insights out of this for students. And we can look at countries as well. So US is only at 21%, that's good. India, 12, and Germany, 7. So a few countries, I'm using like China, is probably the same size developer-wise as the US, so we definitely don't want to get insights into like a global economy of developers. So it's all these things to keep in mind as you look at data. So now if we get into it, let's start actually cleaning it up. So we know that we wanted to look at comp total, and that's kind of the first one. So years code pro, that was the other variable. That looks good. That's a number with some missing values, so we might want to take care of that. We know comp total. Oh, this is not a good histogram, right? This is somebody broke system. So how do these numbers get so high? They get so high because they're bound to a currency. So that's complex. And then there's a comp frequency. So some are yearly and some are monthly. That was my mistake to use in a graph. But is there a better version of that? I know it's a preparation. Somebody already did that in the past. So there's a converted comp yearly column that we have, which is in dollars with commas. So that's not a number. It's used, and if you plot that, it probably makes like as a messy graph as we have now. So there's something we have to clean up. So let's start going into the operations and doing exactly that. We can start by select columns. We have a few operations available, so feel free to explore once it's out. But select columns winds it down to just what we want. So let's reduce this table down to just years code pro and current computer. And also one of the questions I put in, like we want to have some at least fun column, not just more experience means more money. So what else could be in here that could be interesting? So I found this is a great question. What do people do when they get stuck? And as you see, I like to go for walks. So this will be my go for walk activity that I want to actually go segment people on, which is like one of the simplest segmentation. Usually you have way more elaborate ones. Let's see if people go for a walk. So we have the stuck, new stuck, this one. So this should give us, you'll see a preview, everything that's being removed. Let's apply that. So this is where we end up. With only 3 columns, much easier to read. Next one, remove the missing values. Under find and replace, we have drop missing values. That's a very typical data science cleanup problem of just, I have data, I need to wind it down to the data I want to actually look at. In some cases, you want to replace it differently. So there's definitely several ways you can do this. In this case, I just want to drop them. So apply. You saw which columns will be removed. So we're just slowly working our way towards cleaning this up. And what is actually the outcome? Like, will we just save a CSV and say magic happened and we clean it up? No, the great way about Data Wrangler, each time we now did something, it actually generated the code. So in this case, it generated a drop not assigned. Then in the 4 select columns, it actually selected the columns we wanted. So every one of these operations we do ends up being code. So when I later on switch to the new Stack Overflow survey, which hopefully has a similar format, I can still use the same code and apply the same cleanup, and I get hopefully the same data out. So it's a repeatable process, and somebody can actually review it versus the Excel version of I removed stuff. So we are in the operations now. Now we're close enough. We have a comp yearly one that still needs cleanup. So I guess if I would know Python, I would remove that $sign and remove that comma, and I would have a number. But I don't totally know Python, but not that well. So let's use Flashfill. Flashfill is where Data Wrangler really shines. Flashfill is a custom AI that can extract patterns from an input that you provide, and we'll apply that pattern to a whole column of other data. In this case, let's start by naming the column. This would be column yearly, just something shorter. And actually selected, converted column yearly. So now it asks us, give me an example of how this one, just going to show this one, should look like. So 51552. It's a number. Simple. That's good. So now Flashfill will look for the pattern, apply it to the first input, and then apply it to everything else. And magic happens. We now have an actual number. This is typical hard problems in data science now become just matching patterns within Data Wrangler. So let's apply this. So we have a cleaned up column. We can actually drop this one. And let's look at the new stuck version. So this is another data science problem that's very common. You have a survey. It's multiple choice. People click other things. But you are kind of interested in only one of them. So the way so you could just string match, do some other things. But I'm going to use the formula for multi-label text binarizer. This will split this input, the column. And for each value it finds, for each string, it will create a new column, which will make it really easy just to apply machine learning, apply several heuristics across the set. In this case, we're only interested in one. But it gives us a really nice 0 and 1 just classification of the column. It of course gives us way too many for what I'm interested in. So again, we go in, select column, and select only Years Code Pro. This should be go for a walk. And we have comp yearly. So this looks great. And then what I keep forgetting is making this an actual number. Because see, numbers look nice. Numbers get a histogram. This is just unique values. So it's still a string. Let's change column type. Now it's a clear number. We can just convert it with change column type and convert it to U in 64. Yeah, that should be good. Yeah, so we have the preview. We can always know what's the output and check up front. So now we have, no, we still don't have something good. This is still broken. But we can actually go in and just hit filter. And now with the help of the histogram, we can understand, like, let's try everything less than 500,000. Might actually give us 500,000. Give us a better histogram. So we can start cleaning up. Maybe we can still go down to 300,000 and get closer to what we're looking for. Yeah, this is a much better histogram. In proper data science, you want to think about how you remove people and who you're removing. This is demo, so calling out the caveats. So we apply this. We now have 3 nicely cleaned up columns. And we're going to have questions afterwards. So we can hit me up afterwards. So this is nice. Now every couple of clean steps we checked in before. Now we have 9 steps that get generated that we can actually export. And the way it works, export code back to notebook and exit. This will now bring back, let's give some space, bring back this column of the cell into notebook. Going to move it up under where we had our head. So what does this do? There's a clean data function that generated and all the code we saw before, nicely lined up, and it creates this new data frame for df clean. We can now go in and use this new data set in our plot. Let's see how it actually looks like. We can execute this line. And yeah, this is what we just saw in Data Wrangler. So it's perfect. And we know this is now comp yearly, so we can use that column down here. And we can see how this data plots. So this is the graph I wanted. But let's see what Copilot can bring to the conversation. Of course, this is on the AI track, so Copilot has to be mentioned. And in notebooks, it works amazing. Compared to other code where you run it, it will know the code. It might know some of the variable types, depending on which language you use. But in notebooks, it has also the state of the whole notebook in the background. So if you look at variables, these are all the things that are already loaded up within what we're running, including all the columns. So VS Code knows it. But let's start now with just same plot, but wider. So I can iterate. If I have a graph that looks good, I can start iterating on that graph with Copilot and just continuously add and advance and learn from it. Now I know aspect is an argument that I can use in the future to make my graphs more readable when there's more data. So what if we take the same graph and then add color for go for walk option? Now that works. So apparently it's hue. So now I know hue I can use to color my graphs if I have to in the future. So let's see what it looks like though. Yep, exactly what I wanted. So it's really fun with Copilot just to go in, start from one graph, start from one analysis, and maybe give it some more complex things. So we now do in code and then do another one is box plots. Because we did want to answer this question of how do we, is walking actually more advantageous for some? So box plot to compare, that's not what we want, compensation across, not years of coding, but across go for walk versus, no, yeah, this is compare box plot, compare compensation. No, box plot's from school, so that's traditional work. And then, yeah, this is box plot. This sounds good. And X is using this column, and Y is using comp yearly. Let's see what it looks like. Yep. So it's clear. We found proof that people who like to go for walks have higher comp. So don't quote me on that. I first have to review this with my colleagues. But let's do another one. Same plot, but for years of coding experience. The amazing part is once Copilot really guesses which columns you have, it becomes really magical. So same plot, now it puts in years pro. So it starts being this conversational demo that we had in the keynote on the first day, where you're more talking to your notebook. I ended up, when I did the demo, I just ended up typing my comments and executing them, was trying to hope already VS Code will read my mind and put in the right code. So this is where this eventually brings you. You will just try to explain the best as you can which visual you want to put up, and then it will come. So there's a lot of great Seaborn graphs. It has a very rich API. There's a lot of great Seaborn, a lot of Pandas APIs. And Copilot really helps you over time to just get to know them. There's lots of UIs that will come up. For example, pair grid's another one. Pair grid to compare compensation. It's multi-line. Perfect. So pair grid, there's just so many. That's not what I wanted. So if you don't get the one I wanted, I highly recommend the hovering and then open GitHub Copilot. You actually see all the recommendations that it came up with. So this looks much simpler. Pair plot on clean with the U. So we're going to accept that one and rerun it. So it is a trial out, and you can play around with it anytime. So as you have one function that works, you can try the next one. So that's one way to do data science and to keep leveling up. You have your notebooks in VS Code, the place where you also code. It's easier then to pick it up and write it in Python and all the other places you have. And it's the best on GitHub as well. So in this case now, we already have it open. So I could go just in here, commit it back, did it. I can now go into the VS Code built-in PR experience where this already shows up. So the same div you previously saw on GitHub also works on VS Code. So you see all your changes. You can start commenting on them. And now I can leave a review for, OK, got some insights. I can submit. I can see the pull request again within VS Code, including my comments. And now I can say ready for review. So somebody else can come in and actually look at my notebook to see if it makes sense. So all that within VS Code without leaving it ever. And I can later on maybe take this into a Python, refactor it, do actual debugging. So if you want to try it out, Codespaces for data science. VS Code to explore and analyze notebooks is built in thanks to Jupyter and many other notebooks. And then Data Wrangler will be out end of this month. If you already have VS Code and follow us on Twitter, you will hear about it. But definitely try out Copilot in notebooks. It's magical. And it makes you really an expert within data science. Thanks so much.